Hello and welcome to the third PowerPoint talk through on Living World. This is specifically aimed at those working through the textbook chapter on how ecosystems change. Just a reminder about food webs. Remember, a food web is where they show several food chains. In this case, this is a food web supported by an oak tree. Okay, so you've got a tree at the bottom. That provides food for all sorts of insects, spiders, flies, beetles, moths, and aphids. That in turn provides food for the blue tits, the woodpeckers and the sparrows, which in turn provides food for the hawks and owls. But what happens when this web is disturbed? And what we mean by this is something happens in this food web to change it. So let's just imagine we really want to protect woodpeckers. We actually want to see the number of woodpeckers increasing. So what the woodland manager might do is actually decide to cull some of the hawks in the area. What would this mean? And this is really why a lot of these questions come about. So if the hawks disappear, what happens to the food web? Well, first of all, the sparrows and the blue ticks are going to increase. And that's because there's not hawks eating them anymore. So they're actually going to increase in number. Let's see if you can work out what happens next. All these species here, the aphids, the moths, caterpillars, the flies, the spiders, and in fact, to a certain extent, the beetles as well, they're all actually going to decrease because if you think about it, there's going to be more birds, more blue tits, should I say. Let's just say the woodpeckers stay where they are, but there's going to be more sparrows because the hawk's not eating them anymore. But because of that, they're then going to need, because there's more of them, more spiders, more flies, more aphids, more moths and caterpillars. Okay, so that's the principle of really what we're looking at. In the UK, and in Norfolk actually, there is an issue here with the deer problem, and this is just an example of what can happen when a new species is introduced. So muntjac numbers have been around for about 150 years now, and they've increased rapidly. And one of the reasons for this is they've got no natural predators. So they've been introduced into the UK, and by accident, in fact, but they haven't got any natural predators in the UK at the moment. So here's a quote from an article saying here the preference of muntjacs for the most tender and succulent parts of young plants creates conflict with woodland managers, crop growers and gardeners. They're able to clear large areas of ground flora, destroying habitat vital for birds, insects and small mammals and reducing biodiversity. So yeah, we all know muntjacs are cute, they look nice and they're very photogenic, but because there's so many of them, they're actually causing problems. And saying here they're very territorial. Male deer make large scrapes on trees and prey on low branches using their tusks. So they actually do damage our woodlands quite a lot. So this is another example of how an ecosystem can get disturbed by when a species is introduced from another country. So here's the diagram here. That there's quite a lot of questions through on the lesson for this, and it's showing what happened with the reintroduction of wolves. So initially, wolves were very much at the top of the food web, but for various reasons, they died out because people were worried about them eating the elks and things like that, and just general fear about livestock crops. But this led to a very quick expansion in the elk population, which then caused its own problems. This is diagram. It looks very complex at first, and what I want you to do is just go through row by row and see if you can work out what happens. So first of all, here you've got the reintroduction of the grey wolf. 16 packs of around 10 animals. Each pack kills 1 elk per day. Not surprisingly, the elk population is going to fall. Okay, and it's halved actually in 8 years. But also, because of the competition, the coyote population is also going to fall. And however, on the other hand, more kills made by wolves provide more food for scavengers. There are quite a lot of species in any food web where they actually rely on other animals actually killing, and then they come along and they eat what's left. So in the UK, we see quite a lot of magpies doing that. You might have noticed on roads sometimes. If a rabbit's been run down by a car, often the magpies will move in afterwards and scavenge on that. But that's their source of food. And the same's happening here. But of course, go down to the third row and you will see again that there are knock-on effects. So reduction in grazing pressure because there's less elks. Aspen and cottonwood start to regenerate their types of trees, and that provides more tree cover. Because of being less coyotes, there's actually then less voles and mice because that's basically what they would feed on. And because of the increasing food for scavengers, there's more of other types of animals such as grizzly bears. Now the key here is not so much the precise details of this example, because if you did this exam, they'd probably just give you an example from somewhere else. It's the way that one impact from the initial reintroduction of wolves then has a set of consequences, but then that has a set of knock-on consequences. And this is what you've got to try and work through and work out. Okay. And then there's also reference in the questions about physical changes. So most of the changes here are to do with other plants and animals and species, but sometimes even as something as simple as introducing wolves can actually affect the landscape. So they're talking here about there being more pools. So it says here, more woody debris in rivers creates pools and provides trout habitat, okay, because of the increased number of trees. The beavers that have increased, they're going to create ponds, okay. As you're moving over, they'll talk about increased tree cover, okay. So it's amazing to think, isn't it, that actually something as simple as a new type of animal that was always there originally but it's being reintroduced could actually have an effect on the landscape. Okay, so when we're talking about physical, we're very much talking about the landscape itself.